Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thanks for having me. And this is a topic that is absolutely near and dear to my heart. I love user adoption, so I'm going to kind of come off as a kind of a fanboy a little bit during the next hour, but it's only because I'm really passionate about the subject. And we're at the beginning of what we don't know with user adoption. In fact, I kind of like to start off before we get into the slides with a recent epiphany that I had about user adoption. And I want you all to think about it. So I want the audience to just give it a moment, let it kind of rain in on you, think about it, and then give it a couple of days, and then reach back out to me either through Twitter or through my email address, etc. But I wonder if there's a relationship between employee engagement and the technologies that they use on a day in and day out basis. So let's take SuccessFactors as a great example. So let's say you're using SuccessFactors for whatever you use it for, and you're doing all kinds of great stuff, and you're in the application, and the UI and the UX and that experience is a fantastic experience. Does that make your engagement at your company better? Are you happier? Or are you worse off? Are you better off, etc.? And so the epiphany is, or the idea, epiphany is really not the right word. The idea is there a relationship between employee satisfaction or employee engagement and the technologies that we provide in HR for all of our employees, from ATSs to wellness software to payroll software or whatever? Like, is there a relationship? And I think there is. I don't know it. I don't have my finger on it just yet, but I think there's something there, and I want to find out. So if you have any, well, again, just think about it. But over the next couple of days, I want you to reach out to me if you think there is something there, if you think that I'm crazy, etc. But please, it's just something in the last couple of weeks that I've been giving a lot of thought to. So the goal of the webinar in the next hour is really I want you to have a few takeaways. So the thing is my love of HR practitioners runs deep and wide, and I've never been an HR practitioner. I've practiced both recruiting and HR and all the things in between, but as a business owner. And so I speak, and I want to make sure that the audience understands that I've never worked a desk in HR. So to act like I know exactly what goes on in HR would be a lie. However, I speak at a lot of conferences. I interact with HR on a daily basis, and I love HR. I absolutely love the profession of human resources, and I think it is a noble cause. I want HR pros to get a few takeaways over the next hour on how they can manufacture, I'm going to use that word a couple of times during the presentation, how you can manufacture user adoption. And some of these are going to be intuitive, some of them might be counterintuitive, but I want you to know that there are levers that can be pulled. And so if you feel like you're behind the 8 ball, or if you're wondering how, when you buy your new shiny object, how you're going to get people to care about it, you can manufacture that. So I want you to get a couple takeaways. And the last thing before you go on to the first slide is key interval. You might know my name, or maybe you don't, but anyhow, Tincup is a pretty easy name to remember. It is the tin and the cup. And so I, with John Sumser, have launched a new research firm, an analyst firm, in the last couple of weeks. And so the brand, if you will, of Key Interval Research might be new to you. Let it kind of sink in. Give it a couple of years. Hopefully you'll fall in love with it and John and I's research. It's born out of 1,000 curiosities, I would tell you. Key Interval, John and I have been working together for a number of years, and we absolutely love each other and love spending time around one another, and we're really curious about the space. We're really curious especially about the intersections of HR and technology. Those, if you deal with the intersection there's all kinds of very interesting things that happen. And so enough about all of that. Let's get to the fun stuff. So this little cartoon character that you see right here is actually done by Ray Sumser, John's son, who's a working artist in New York, and that is me. That's what I look like. Ironically enough, I do have green glasses and a purple beard. I'm just kidding. The most important part of this whole bit on this slide is my contact information. I am an advocate of user adoption and will forever be an advocate of user adoption. Anything that I can ever do, if you have a question, if you're curious about something, or if you're a complaint, or if you just want to kind of get on the phone and talk to me about user adoption, I'm there for you. I'm that guy. Here's all the pertinence. And so what I want you to kind of get out of this slide is just, I'm easy. I'm very easy to find on the internet. But I wanted to make it even easier by just giving you all of my contact information. So here's what we got with user adoption. When people talk about UI, which is user interface, UX, which is user experience, and UA, which is user adoption, these are actually three different things. We kind of blend them in. We kind of use them synonymously between when people talk about UI, UX, and UA. They kind of throw them all together like soup. And truth is, those are all three very different things. And the adoption of technology, the words I really kind of want you to think about are consumption and usage. So when we think of adoption, what do we think of adoption outside of puppies and kids and whatnot? It's how do people consume the technology? How do they use the technology? So the interface, which is UI, is important, critical actually, I would tell you. It's what do we do when we interact with the purple and the blue and the gray and the arrows and the keys and this and the other? Like, what is that interface that we interact with? The Twitter interface, Facebook interface, keep going around all the different horns of all the software that you use, both on your phone, your tablet, your PC, etc. And you're going to find all kinds of different interfaces. And every software company in our space, there are 22,000 software applications that suit HR and recruiting in the world, and they all go about user interface in different ways. They all go about user experience, which is the procession. It's how do we want people to feel when you go from one to the other to the thing, and you go from one table to the next table, and you go from one pull down to the next. That's the experience, which is commonly referred to UX. And what is the experience that we want people to feel when they go through our software? UA, which is what we'll be talking about for the next 50 minutes or so, is really consumption. It's usage. And so these 10 things that are in front of you, from communications all the way to metrics, this is how we want to think about adoption. And the common misperception of almost not all, but a lot of software firms, and not just in our space, but really across all enterprise software, is that UI and UX solves user adoption. If I just have a slick enough interface, and if I just make the experience of interacting with the software easier, then they'll adopt the technology. The further from the truth is that misperception, okay? So here's the thing. When someone says that to you, now, I don't want you to call them a liar, but I want you to think that they're lying, because it is a lie. And it's a lie that we're all told, and it's a lie that people tell to us, that if we make this technology just so simple that people will just use it. And the problem with all of that is that change is in the middle. The old way and the new way, and whether or not you're moving from Post-it notes, Excel spreadsheets, carved tablets, from one application to the other, there's always change. UI, critical. UX, critical. They do not solve user adoption solely. You actually have to manufacture user adoption. And before we get into the 10 of these, what I will probably come to at least 15 times in the next hour is work with your partner, your vendor partner. When you choose a vendor partner, you are making kind of a life choice. Go deep with them. Be a collaborator. And they know things about their software that you'll never know, and you know things about, as a practitioner, you know things about the employees that they'll never know. But somewhere in the middle is a great place where you can collaborate. But it takes both parties wanting to collaborate. And user adoption is one of those things that is a noble pursuit that we should collaborate on. So let's get to communications. So here's what we have in communications. No one in HR that I know of, and even at the largest companies, have great communications plans for for new software and adoption of software. And what I would tell you is, as you look at the slide and you read the things, I'm going to highlight a couple things. Most implementations fail because of three things: communications, training, and change management. We're going to get to all three of those today, but communications is one of the three-legged parts of the stool, if you will. And communications is something you can work with and collaborate with your software partner. So take SuccessFactors as a for example. They've rolled out SuccessFactors as a company to thousands of users. They have ideas on ways that communicate, that technology communications can happen, should happen, examples of which, etc. Ask them. So the first thing is acknowledging that we need to communicate this change. Okay, we need to think about the audience in a way that maybe marketers think about audiences. And so one of the things I would say is the first thing is collaborate. Like if you get nothing out of this slide, get the fact that collaborate with your software provider. Work with them to come up with a great communication strategy that explains why we're making a change. If we're moving from one provider to another, then let's explain that. Like, well, why is that? Let's get people to understand why things are happening and not just drop things on them. One of the fails that we have in HR is that we drop technology on them and say, okay, hey, next Tuesday is the new training for the thing, and okay, Godspeed. And we hope that they get it, and they don't. And I think we need to back up and understand what are their needs. And so we need to think of the audience in a different way. And so one of the things I would say is halfway down the slide is think about your audience in different kind of groups. And I've got a couple in there where I kind of all users, HR, admins, managers, and executives. But that's not going to be your company. Your company is going to be different than that. That's just a framework, and I want you to think about your audience groups in a way that says, how do they need to know line managers versus employees? So let's take performance reviews as a great example. So what do line managers need to know? What do managers need to know that's different than regular users that are going to be, get a review, once a quarter? Like, what do they need to know differently about the software? And so they have needs. We need to do a better job of letting them know that the new technology is coming and why it's important, how they're going to use it, and what benefit they get out of that technology, etc. So the last bullet point is something I really want to kind of key you in on before we move to the next slide, is how do we want them to feel the first time they interact with the software? So again, let's take, because we're here with SuccessFactors, let's take this as a great example. We purchase SuccessFactors, we go through a very, a process in which we select them. It's amazing, we love it, we fell in love, we've fallen in love with the demo, we're there, we're launching, everything's great, but we have thousands of employees that are about to interact with SuccessFactors for the very first time in their lives. What do we want them to feel? We have all the power to manufacture their feelings the first time they interact with SuccessFactors. So what do we want them to feel? That's all on us. And so really to wrap communications and put a bow on this one, I would say work with your partner, okay? Think about your audience and their needs. And 18 months is the rule of thumb for technology change management. So when we look at how long that arc takes, again, most of the failure can come back to not having a great communication plan, not communicating relentlessly enough and long enough. And I think that last point of long enough is where we need to spend more time and say, you know what, change takes a long time, and we need to be more diligent about going further out in the process of communicating why this change is important and critical to the organization. So let's move to the next slide. Assessment, one of my favorites. So turns out people learn differently. So if you were to line up 10 people, you'd probably find that there are 10 different learning styles. I myself do not learn by reading a manual, okay? I'm not that guy. I've never learned anything from a manual, Okay, so giving me a manual, yeah, that's a waste of everybody's time. I'm never going to read it. I won't look at it. I for sure won't learn anything from it. So how do we get to the point of knowing those audiences and knowing their learning styles? Well, it turns out the assessment industry can provide us ways in which to find out and discover how people learn. And so we need to assess. We need to assess to find out what exactly, how do you like to learn? How do we need to deliver things to you because of your learning, I would say disability, but that's not true. It's difference. Your learning difference, which is a challenge that needs to be overcome, and your learning style, your preference on how you like to consume learning. So I want to kind of get to something that's on the slide that's probably going to cause most of you to kind of like, what is that? That anxiety gaps. Okay, so here's how this comes about. Turns out you have employees that are both confident, and competent in the software that you already currently have. And now you're about to move to success factors. You make the move, and they're not confident and they're not competent at with success factors yet. They will be, but they're not yet. Well, there's a gap there where they're not competent, and there's an anxiety that's behind that. We need to discover, as HR pros, we need to discover those anxieties. What are those anxieties? What's there? Like, does this change causing you anxiety? It's a great question to ask employees, because I want to know, and if it is, I want to root it out, and I want to take care of it. But I got to acknowledge that you might have anxieties about this technology change. See, the ripples of our decisions, when we make a technology purchase, that's not just, it happens in a vacuum. That affects a lot of people. And so I want to assess their learning style differences. I want to assess what kind of anxieties that I have. And I also want to look at what type of skills that were there or missing, and so what kind of gaps exist. And so we use assessment. We're great in HR and in recruiting. We're great at assessing. We're great at it on pre-hire. We're fantastic. Leadership assessments, we're great. Understanding personality, fantastic. But not a lot of us have taken those assessments and moved that into technology adoption. Like, how do we learn things about our audience and our employees to better facilitate adoption of technology? And I want you to do that. I want you to think of that thought. So that's assessment. Training. Okay, so this is the second leg of the stool, right? So communications was the first one, training is the second one, and I want to be relentless about training because I believe that the most of the value that comes out of our technology purchases comes out of our ability, of people's ability to bend the software. So their usage, their consumption, their adoption of the technology is a direct correlation back to the investment that we make in the technology. We're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on great software. Fantastic, check, keep doing that. But I want people to be very comfortable in the technology. So I want to communicate to them on the front end. I want to find out, so far, I'm building a story here. I want to find out how they like to learn, and now I want to train them relentlessly. So as you read this slide, I want you to think about, how do we teach? So how we facilitate that training, and how our software partner helps us and guides us through this process. And whether or not you use a train-the-trainer model, whether or not you do the webinar, or whether or not you use an online library, or whether or not, it doesn't matter. Whatever will get the most adoption, fantastic, I want to do that. So I want to teach people, and I want to find out what's important for them to learn. For every user, what do they need to learn? And what content should be delivered. So as you look at that, like, okay, at the end of the day, we're delivering things back to this wonderful group of people, and this training, what's going to get us the biggest bang for the buck? What should be delivered? So best practices, as you look at training best practices, you know, this is going to be like a custom glove, right? What fits you in your organization? So let me go back. Working and collaborating with your partner, your software partner, is a lot about learning what they see that works in training. So the first question I would have for my software partner is, I would say, listen, what's the bleeding edge? Okay, give me that. What's things that are stale and old and don't work as much as they used to? And what's working right now? Because SuccessFactors, again, and SAP, great examples, they're doing thousands of trainings. So they've got all kinds of great information about what works, what doesn't, what moves the needle, what doesn't. And so they'll tell you, hey, listen, here's what we're seeing right now. One-on-one, out. Train the trainer, it depends on the trainer. Okay, but we've got to certify the trainer. So we can do a train the trainer model, but the trainer has to be certified in the software. Okay, that model works, okay, because they know the software so well, they're comfortable getting up in front of an audience of 100 or 200 or 1,000 and training people. Fantastic. But working and collaborating with your software provider and your partner, critical. And so the second to the last bullet point is important as a note of the new way. So whenever you look at training, there's the old way and the new way. And I don't mean that I mean that in the, are you moving from Post-it notes or an Excel spreadsheet to SuccessFactors? So there's an old way. There's a way that you used to do it. So let's say that, for example, you used to do performance reviews and you used to track all of that stuff using Excel. Fantastic. A lot of people start there. Good. You move to SuccessFactors. There's a new way that these things are going to be done. There's a new way of delivery. There's a new way of management. There's a new way of facilitating. Okay. There's a new way of keeping track of that whole thing. Old way, new way. What we care most about is making sure people understand and training people to the new way. Like we recognize, we understand they used to do it this way. Fantastic. Totally recognize that point. Here's the new way, and here's why it's important. We want people to be dipped in the new way, and to have a real understanding and command of the new way. So the fun and interactive, at the end of the day in your organization, it might not be fun and interactive. At the end of the day, that's going to fit your culture and your values and your company like a glove. That's what was really important. I mean, I put that in there as a way of saying, listen, it can be, but that's got to be only if it makes sense to your company, if it's fun and interactive. So that's training. Second leg of the stool, critical, absolutely critical. So let's take a look at onboarding. We in HR know onboarding. If we know anything, we know onboarding. So you go through the entire talent acquisition process, you source the candidate, you interview, you screen, you do the whole bit, you make an offer, they say yes, you say yes, you have that magical moment where they come on as a new employee and voila, your work is done, they go on and add a lot of value to the firm. Well, kinda. We need to take what we do really well in onboarding for employees new to the company, and we need to apply those things like we did with assessments. We need to apply what we know, and we need to apply that to technology adoption. Because when a person first interacts with that software, we want to conjure up and manufacture that feeling. So how do we onboard them? How do we treat them humanely? Is really kind of the point, but because all of that change is pain, it represents pain, but what we can do in that onboarding, just like we do with new employees to the company, is we can make that a magical moment. And we can, by the way that we interact with them as we onboard them to the new technology, we can get them to acknowledge that, oh, this is going to be fantastic. This is going to be great for me. This is great for the company. I understand why we're doing this. They're training me in the way that I want to be trained. They understand how I want to learn. And now I feel this magical moment, and I'm falling in love with software. Dare I say, you can actually fall in love with software. You can fall in love with business-critical software, and I see it every single day. And a lot of that you can go back to the onboarding experience on how they first interacted with the software. So one of the things I want you to kind of think about in onboarding is how do you pair people up? How do you get people excited? And a strategy that I've seen at a very large telecommunications firm, which I can't note, is they did a buddy program. And they did it in onboarding where they knew that they had people that were really savvy with technology, and they partnered them up with people that aren't as savvy or aren't as comfortable with technology, and they created a buddy program, and they did it in the onboarding phase. And they paired people up. They got people to acknowledge if they were comfortable or not as comfortable, and in that onboarding phase is where we can create this. What they did is they partnered people up and said, listen, this is a game of adoption. It's a game of getting people to fall in love, and use and consume the software. Let's start at onboarding, and let's make sure that they have a fantastic experience. So key here on onboarding that I really want you to think about is that first experience that users have. And I'll be critical of HR for just a moment, if you'll allow me. Most of our failures as it relates to technology purchases can be rooted in one thing. We've put a lot of emphasis in selection of software and not as much emphasis on what happens after we select the software. And so if you go back for the last 15 years, most of our energy has been in vendor selection. It's been in partner selection, evaluating and picking the right software. And what I would probably say about that is that's maybe 20% of the game. The game isn't just selecting the right software. We've selected success factors. They're fantastic, done. But now, how do we get people to fall in love with it? It becomes a different game. And it's going to take different skills, and a lot of it's going to be a little bit painful, but it's not just a game of selection. So anywho, I don't like to be critical. I hate it when people are overtly critical of HR, but we need to acknowledge that we've spent too much of our time, money, and energy on selection. So there's onboarding. Change. Oh boy, this is the third leg of the stool. Change. No one likes change, turns out. No one's in love with change. I don't care who you are. You might have a more adaptive people around you, and they can consume change in different ways, but no one really loves change. Not if you're really confident, and not really if you're super competent at something. You don't really want to change that. And that goes all the way from new cars to new houses to pick anything, new neighborhoods. No one likes change. However, it is the third leg of our stool, and it is extremely critical that we get great at change. And it turns out we're pretty good at change in other areas of the business, not technology change. So we're doing the old way, we're doing the new way, and there's the gap in the middle, current state, future state. So current state is we have to evaluate what is there, how do people interact with these technologies, how does the job, the process, the thing get done, and how do we want it to get done in the future? And one thing I would tell you is process is more important than technology. And let me say that again to make sure that everyone really gets the point. If anyone ever tells you that it's a chicken-egg conundrum of process and technology, again, I don't want you to call them a liar or get in a fist fight. However, I want you to think that they're lying to you, because they are, or they're just incompetent. Process is always more important than technology. And I don't care what it is, if it's succession management or performance management or wellness or whatever. Getting your process right, critical. Now, here's the good news. The good news is that your technology partners have access to fantastic processes. They have a different vista. They have a different vantage point in which to look at the world. And they see things that work that you can't see because of where you're at. So talk with them about it. If you believe your process is bulletproof, and this is the work that we have to do on the front end, is we have to be critical of our own process and say, is our process bulletproof? Because if it is, fantastic, you're ready for new tech. If you're not and you don't feel comfortable there, then this is a moment of vulnerability, but this is a moment that you go to your technology partner and you say, hey, listen, I think our process is about 80%. I think we're okay, but not great. Could you take a look at it? Could we talk a little bit about it? And I want to, again, just like training, just like communications, do you know of other things that we should be looking at? Companies our size, in our industry, our geography, with our hiring, with our employee needs, etc. Are there any other things that we should be looking at? And guess what? If you ask, they'll tell you. And so some of this is the burden of asking, and we need to be vulnerable. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be vulnerable in communications. It's okay to be vulnerable in training, and it's okay to be vulnerable not knowing what you don't know, or being comfortable in understanding that, listen, they're not going to hurt you. They want this to go just as successful as you do. It's in their best interest that the implementation and the usage of technology is fantastic. That's in their best interest and also in yours. So you have shared, I'd say not experience, you have shared expectations. You both want great things to happen. So the second bullet point is just a great project management kind of a, axiom, if you will, is plan the work and work the plan. And this is where change is when you're moving all the pieces around. I once worked with a Canadian company that they worked on their change management plan for 9 months before the technology was purchased. So there are people out there in the world that really, really get into this stuff, and they really think about all the edges of what does change look like in an organization. And so if you got people out in the field that are going to be using the application on a mobile device, on a mobile phone, they're going to be using it at home or this or that or the other, it's like thinking about how the ripples of change and how those things happen. Nothing is easy there. But it's the third leg of the stool, and it's critical. I mean, this is, again, I had Janine Truitt on my podcast today, and she's an implementation specialist. And her number one, I asked her the question, right? Why do implementations fail? What's the common pitfalls? She said change management, period. Like, we don't even have to go to the second one because it's wrapped up in change management. You either do it well or you don't. And your implementations either succeed or fail based on one thing. This is her statement. So that's very strong language coming from someone that does it day in and day out. So I believe much of the same. And so here's one of the things I would tell you about change management. So treat your vendor partner as a wonderful resource and a collaborator. Okay. Second, think of your peer group. Everybody that you've interacted, if you're in SHRM or if you're an HCI person or whatever, I don't even care, local communities, whatever, there are people out there that are just like you going through the exact same experience, and they're your brethren. They are your practitioner clique. Reach out to them. I'm struggling with this, or I'm really I want to know how to do this better. Does anyone have access to a great consultant, or does anyone, some of the failure points around this? And guess what? Your peers will help you, but you got to talk to them. You got to communicate with them. You got to network with them, etc. Okay. So change, critical. The fourth bullet point about what you did yesterday and what you'll do tomorrow. Again, I'm kind of echoing, I'm using a couple different ways of saying the same thing around old way, new way, because that's change. That's what the UI and the UX people don't get, is that right there, the delta of those two things, it's humongous. It's the Grand Canyon for some people. So we have to talk, we have to think, we have to plan and plot and do all of those things. We have to understand how to manufacture change and get people comfortable with it. So as you look at the different stages of adoption, this is a very simplistic model of early adopters, on pace, and laggards. And you're going to have this breakout. Whenever you do an implementation, you're going to have this breakout. You're going to have people that just consume the technology faster than you even think. Like, if you think it takes them a month, they're going to get it done in 2 days. Those are your early adopters. Then you're going to have people that, no, it's going to take a month. Fantastic. It took, 28 days right there with you. Those are on pace. So they're right there to the track and right there with you. And then you're going to have some people that you thought it was going to take a month, and it's going to take them 6 months. And that's every technology implementation in the history of forever. I don't care what technology you deal with. That's how the world's built. It's understanding that you will have laggards. It's the game for us, though, is how do we make laggards faster? So it's not to say, how do we eradicate the planet from laggards? Well, yeah, that's never going to happen. But how do we make them faster? How can we take that 6 months as an example, and how do we make it 4 months? How do we make that 6 months and make it 3.5 months? And so we need to think of the world and understand our audience, and understand our employees well enough to know, hey, Bob's more comfortable with the fax machine than he is with the internet. Okay, yeah. Hey, I'm not going to change Bob. Bob is who he is. But I need to understand that Bobs exist in my organization. And do not make the mistake. It gets made every single day. Do not make the mistake that this is a generational thing, that somehow millennials have popped out of the womb and understand technology at such a deeper level than boomers. That's just a lie. It's not the truth, and don't fall victim to that line of thinking, because it's not about age or race or gender or any of that other stuff that divides us. This is about understanding that there are people that are going to consume your technology choices, and they're going to do it either early or at pace, so they're going to do it late. And that's humanity. Have a nice day. So when you look at when I say process touches, what I really mean by that is understanding that you need to touch people, you need to actually interact with them, and not just in a communication or training way, but you need to think about how you understand where you're at with your change plan over the course of a longer period of time. And so I want you to think about, okay, how does change happen in that first wave? And how does it happen over the second wave? And then again, getting back to the laggards that are going to take 6 months, okay, getting them faster and into the technology, consuming, using the technology. How do we do that over the long term? And something that gets forgotten here in change is you get through the whole process and everything's fantastic, and then you go and hire 100 employees, or you go and acquire a new firm with 5,000 new employees. Oh, okay. Well, now you got to kind of dust the change management plan off again and figure out, okay, they're about to have a new experience with this technology. So what do we do to then get them basically starting over? How do we get them back into this technology? With new employees, again, we have a new employee. That's a new experience that we get to manufacture. So those are good things. So that's change. That's the third leg of the stool. We still got a bunch more to kind of interact with. So here's what you got in performance. If you really want people to consume technology, so let's take success factors as a for example, and managers are a great way to do this. If you really want them to consume the technology, make it a part of their job description. Make it a part of their performance review. A performance review that basically says, listen, your mastery of the technology is important to us, and it's going to be tied to your performance, and it's going to be tied to your compensation, and it will also be tied to succession. We care that much about it that we've actually woven your usage of the technology into your job. You're getting graded on this, Bill, Timmy, Ed, Nancy, whatever. So we care so much about it. And this, again, when I said the levers and how you can pull the levers and manufacture usage and consumption and adoption, this is one. This is optional. A lot of people don't do this. So take ATSs as a great example. If you have recruiters that are in and out of the ATSs, if you really want them to use the ATS, guess what? Make it a part of their job. Your use of the technology, the recruiting technology that we bought for you, is so critical to us that we're going to grade you on it. We're going to promote you in some way based on your mastery of the technology. So if you're looking for one of those little nuggets that says, I really want to know how to manufacture user adoption, add it to their job description, add it to the performance, period, end of story. And guess what? You'll have just manufactured user adoption. Not necessarily happiness, but you'll at least get them using the systems. So that's really what I really wanted you to get out of performance is this is not one of the three legs of the stool. However, you can really pull this lever and get people to use software, and it's important to have in the mix. Succession. We do a decent enough job in succession in the real world, in real HR, around understanding who are the most critical employees in the company. And a lot of people in HR kind of hold to the belief that 80% of the value comes from 20% of the workforce. Whether or not it's true or not, I don't want to have an argument over that. However, thinking about the roles inside of the software applications that are the most critical, so let's say you have admins or super users or power users to your software applications, what happens if they're not there? So let's take a global payroll play, and you've got 3 people in the entire organization that can run global payroll, period. What if all 3 of them, something happens to them? They're all in New Jersey, and Hurricane Sandy happens, and they're all offline for 6 weeks. How do you get payroll done? And if we don't think that thought, then what we're confronted with an emergency. We don't need to be confronted with emergencies around how do we think critically about the people that use technology. We need to think about all the users of the technology. So really what I want you to do when you're doing your implementation plan and when you're talking, with your solutions provider, it's having a conversation or two about what are the most critical roles. There's Jane, there's Ted, there's Jennifer. At the end of the day, everyone's important, but these people are critical. So what do we do to train, cross-train, and have redundancy for these 3 critical roles? So what do we need to do? And it's thinking about it, having conversations about it, and then putting a plan together that says, oh no, we're ready. If anything were to happen, God forbid, if anything were to happen to any of those 3 people, we're ready. And that's the essence of succession. That's the essence of succession in HR and for the company. This is also what we need to take out of that and learn about technology is we need to think about succession inside of our technology adoption plan. So again, not one of the critical 3 or the 3 legs of the stool, yet still important, something we need to do during implementation. So rewards. This is going to be a lot like performance. Okay, not one of the critical 3. However, if you want a way to manufacture, incentivize, so incentives and rewards work in an organization. Okay, whether or not it's Starbucks gift cards or cash or vacations in Vegas or whatever, turns out in every corporation in America, actually in the world, incentives work. Rewards work. They motivate. Now, they work differently in different companies, and that's kind of the hard part to understand is that in company A, Starbucks gift cards work. In company B, just cash works. In your company, you know what will motivate your employees. Okay, this is a great way to work with your solutions provider, with your technology provider. Is basically create a plan like, hey, what works? If we want to manufacture adoption, what gets people to really use the technology? So this isn't about creating excitement and love. This is about how do we reward Billy for using the technology? Because, Billy and Nancy need to be rewarded. You know what? I don't want to have the argument of, well, do we have to? It's part of their job. Yeah, a lot of things are part of people's job. One of the things we're trying to do in HR is unlock discretionary effort. And so we're always on the hunt for ways to unlock discretionary effort. That's why so many people talk about culture and values and employee engagement. But truth is, if we want people to use the technology, we can manufacture that by putting a great incentive plan in front of them. So it's knowing the audience, knowing our employees, knowing what works with them, and then applying that back to technology to manufacture adoption, because that is one of the levers that we can use to then manufacture adoption. So let's take a look now at engagement. So I believe there's a great power and strength in the user communities. So user conferences, user communities, whether or not they're in LinkedIn or they're a part of the software, I've seen user communities inside the software. Local groups get together. I'm in Dallas, Texas, so the local groups of people, chapters get together. They have a session and they teach each other different tricks. I believe in that stuff. I'm so geeky about that stuff that I love those things. I think there's a great power in that. When you're looking at your entire user base and you look at these power users, there's Jim and Ted and Allison, and they're all power users of, let's say, SuccessFactors. Send them out. Get them out and active into these user communities. And if there's a wonderful, like SuccessFactors just had Success Connect a couple of weeks back, send them to that. Get them to go to those things so they can learn more about the product. They can learn more about how to bend the technology and what's coming next in the technology. And you can reward them for being awesome in the technology. And, oh, by the way, they come back and they can train everyone in what's coming and how to, they're going to learn things. And when you really go learn those things, come back and teach us the things that you've learned. So it's a way to reward in kind of a funny way, and that's why we think of it like engagement. But really it's also a way to do knowledge sharing. It's a modern way to do knowledge sharing. So you send folks out, you bring them back, and then they tell you about things that they've learned. Again, not one of the critical, the three legs of the stool, but an important way to learn more about the technologies that you spent lots of money on, and it's a way to reward the people that are awesome in the technology. And I think it's a way to engage employees. And at the end of the day, I think that we're always on the hunt for ways to engage our employees, and this is just yet another one. So I want to have that arrow in the quiver for you. So metrics. So here's the deal about metrics. Every software, again, I mentioned that there are 22,000 software applications in the world. Every single one of them have a different metric. It's number of times logged in, it's the last time, the duration of the last time, but in between logins. It's like take performance reviews. A great metric is online completion. And completion to the date. Are we 100%? Are we at 98% of completion on time? And so every one of these applications has different metrics. What I care about with metrics is I want you to ask your technology provider, what do they see? When they're measuring success, what are other practitioners looking at when they're looking at success? Like, how do we know we got out of, again, SuccessFactors, because we're here today, let's use them as a great example. How do we know we got everything out of SuccessFactors? We spent the money. We like dealing with them. Everything's kind of going along charmingly enough. But how do we know if we're being successful? And so metrics, just like in every other aspect of HR, metrics can drive this conversation. And so there is no magic bullet in terms of metrics. But what I want you to do is I want you to ask your technology provider, and they're going to give you a couple and say, all right, here's what we're seeing. We're seeing that that if you want successful on, let's say, completion of performance reviews, people need to log in 3 weeks before the review date. If they don't, it won't happen on time. If they do it too far in advance, it won't happen on time. So the magic number is about 3 weeks. So like it's stuff like that you'll never know as a practitioner. The technology provider will always know those things. So ask them, and then figure out what you think is important as it relates to metrics. So those are the 10 things, and I've got a couple more slides, and then I want to see if we have any questions. But the last thing is, it's really a tattoo that I should have somewhere on my body, but I don't. And I want you to think about this when I say it. A feature is not a feature unless users use said feature. So when we're sold technology, we're sold a whole lot of hope, a whole lot of things that kind of come at us as hope, and we consume that and we love that. Okay, done. Purchase has been made. But at the end of the day, if your users don't use the features, they're not features. And so what I would tell you is, for us in HR, it's a game of getting people to use the features. And for the software folks, it's a different story. It's about making sure that the features are truly feature worthy. So make sure that you think about that as you're evaluating and looking at different software. Like, is this really a feature to me? Okay, so one of the things I want to tell you about key interval, and we'll wrap this up really quickly, is in September, John and I are going to be researching user adoption. Really, it's the how are people really behind the veil, how are people really consuming technology. So I really don't want to belabor the point, and I hate people that are overtly salesy and stuff like that. I just want you to know and have it on your calendar. We're going to do a ton of research in August and talk to a bunch of practitioners, do focus groups and things of that nature, and we're going to learn a lot. And we'll know more when we get done with that. So somewhere around the 15th of September, we'll have that report ready. If you're curious and you can remember a year in advance, let me know, and we can put you on a list and all the other stuff. But I just want to put it on your radar that it's so important to us. We're actually going to go and research it. So I'm not just giving it lip service and saying, oh no, user adoption, very important to me. We're going to go and spend one of our precious 10 months to research how people really consume technology in space. So the last slide is, again, my funny picture of me and my contact information. And I want you to know that I'm an advocate for user adoption. I'm an advocate for practitioners. If you have any questions in any way that you want to communicate to me, whether or not it's positive or you want to give me some critical feedback, etc., I can take it. I can dish it out, and I can take it. So I'm a big boy in that way. But this is all of the pertinence. And so reach out to me if and when you feel that you need to. And thank you for your time today.
That's terrific. Thank you so much, William, for sharing all this information. Just a reminder for folks that the on-demand replay will be available within an hour on the virtual site. I'm sure this session proved useful to you, but we also encourage you to explore the many resources in the Resource Center as well as visit with our partners in the Expo Hall. So thank you all for participating in this session today. And with that, I will say goodbye for now.